The small cafe was quiet for most of the day, except for the sound of coffee machines and soft chatter. She moved among the tables with careful steps, clearing plates and filling cups. Her uniform was plain, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her face had a calm, almost invisible expression. Many people came and went without noticing her, and that was exactly how she liked it. She had learned early on that being invisible sometimes made life easier. People rarely bothered you if they didn't see you, but today, the air in the room felt different. There was a small gathering for a friend's birthday, and the place was a little livelier than usual. Balloons and small decorations hung around the room, and laughter floated through the space. She moved quietly, refilling drinks and keeping the floor clean. She liked the soft rhythm of her work, the small movements, and the simple interactions. Nothing flashy, nothing overwhelming. Just her and the tasks she knew well. At the far corner of the room, an old upright piano stood against the wall. Its wood was scratched and worn, a little dusty, but it seemed proud, like it had seen many years of music and life. She had noticed it before, of course, but she had never touched it. The piano was part of the room's charm, but it was not part of her world. Music was something she kept to herself, a secret that lived in her small apartment at night after the cafe closed. There, she would play until her fingers ached, till the quiet of the night filled every empty space in her mind. The laughter from the birthday group grew louder. One of them pointed to her, smiling in a teasing way, and said, "Hey, why don't you play something on that old piano? Let's hear what you've got." The words were not serious, not meant to encourage her, just a light joke for the group's amusement. People laughed, some clapping lightly, waiting for her reaction. Her hands paused mid-step. She felt a flicker of surprise, quickly followed by a familiar sense of doubt. Most people never expected anything from her. Most people never noticed her, and now suddenly they wanted her to perform. The thought was almost funny. She imagined herself sitting at the piano, playing, while they laughed at her mistakes. The picture made her stomach twist. It would be a joke, and she would be the punchline. Yet there was another feeling, one she hadn't felt in a long time. A small spark, quiet but persistent, telling her that maybe this could be different. Maybe she could show something, not for their amusement, but for herself. She shook her head slightly and kept moving, pretending she had not heard the suggestion. After all, she had learned to survive by staying unnoticed. Playing for a crowd of strangers, even a small one, went against every instinct she had cultivated. She continued her work, refilling glasses and clearing crumbs from the tables. But her mind was elsewhere, circling back to the piano. She remembered nights spent in her apartment, hands moving over the keys, filling the empty spaces with music that no one heard. Music that spoke when words failed. She remembered the first time she realized she could play, the feeling of joy that came when a melody finally made sense. When her fingers seemed to move on their own. Those nights were hers alone, quiet and private, and they meant everything to her. A sudden cheer from the birthday group pulled her out of her thoughts. Someone else had leaned on the piano, pretending to try a note, and the room had laughed. She felt her chest tighten. The laughter was light, playful, but it stung. They saw her as someone who could be mocked, someone who could be part of the fun without ever being respected. She was small, quiet, and they assumed that anything she did would be just that, a joke. Still, she found herself moving toward the piano, almost without thinking. Her steps were slow, measured. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of expectations and doubt pressed down on her. People noticed her approaching and stopped their chatter, watching with curiosity. Some still smiled, thinking this was part of the joke, part of the entertainment they had called for. But there was a different energy now, a small tension in the room. Like the air itself was holding its breath, she stood in front of the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. She felt the texture of the old wood beneath her hands, felt the coolness of the ivory keys, and for a moment she remembered the countless nights she had practiced in silence. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe, trying to calm the sudden rush of nervousness and fear. She reminded herself that no one could take away her skill. No one could diminish what she had learned in those quiet hours alone. Her fingers finally touched the keys. lightly at first, testing the instrument. A soft sound emerged, delicate and careful. The laughter had not yet begun, but the room was waiting, expecting the clumsy noise of a failed attempt. She felt a small smile form inside her, not on her lips, but in her chest. She would not be the joke. Not today. Not ever. People shifted in their seats, some whispering to each other, wondering if she could actually play. They'd assumed she would fail. The thought that she might succeed had never crossed their minds. Their laughter had been confident, easy, casual. Now it was quiet, replaced by a sense of anticipation. Though they did not yet understand it, she began to play a simple melody, one that she had played hundreds of times alone. The notes were soft, clear, and precise. The sound filled the corners of the room, wrapping around the walls and floating above the heads of the listeners. The atmosphere changed subtly. The laughter that had been expected did not come. The clinking of glasses and the murmurs of conversation quieted. As if the music demanded attention, her hands moved with familiarity, guided by memory and feeling. Each note was deliberate, each movement practiced and true. She felt the rhythm in her body, the music in her mind, and the room around her faded into a blur. The people watching became background, distant shapes who might be surprised or moved. But she played not for them, not yet. She played for herself, for the years of private practice, for the joy and relief she had found in music when nothing else seemed to matter. The first few bars were steady, almost cautious. She allowed herself to listen, to feel the space, to sense the room's response. The sound was not loud or overpowering, but it was impossible to ignore. It had depth, a richness that surprised even her in that moment. She realized that her own nervousness had created tension in her fingers, tension that now turned into focus and control. Each key was an extension of her thoughts, each chord a reflection of her emotions. The birthday group sat quietly, some leaning forward, some still unsure what was happening. The jokes and teasing had vanished, replaced by curiosity, and then something closer to awe. They had asked her to play for laughs, but already the laughter seemed distant, inappropriate, unnecessary. She was doing something unexpected, something honest, and the room felt it. She continued, letting the music flow from simple notes into a soft, rising melody. It was not complicated, but it carried emotion and intent. Her hands moved gracefully, her mind entirely focused. She felt a sense of liberation she had not known she could experience in front of others. This was her, fully present, fully alive, fully herself. And the room was listening. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen, in a way that did not depend on words or judgment. The piano was her voice, and through it, she was speaking clearly, honestly, and with power. The quiet that had always been her refuge became her strength, and the people around her began to realize that what they had, expected laughter and failure, was not going to happen. The initial notes ended, but she kept her fingers poised, ready for the next phrase. She felt her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from excitement. From the thrill of sharing something so personal and profound. The music was hers, but now it belonged to the room too. Shared in a way that made her feel connected and alive. She glanced up briefly, catching the eyes of a few people who had been laughing just moments ago. Their expressions were different, now confused, surprised, and slowly shifting toward admiration. It was a small victory, but it mattered. She realized that her skill, her dedication, and her quiet confidence had given her something more powerful than laughter: attention, respect, and acknowledgement. For a moment, the cafe was still, except for the soft, steady sound of the piano. The world outside did not exist, only the music and the people who had come to witness it. Even if they did not know what they were witnessing yet. She played, not loudly, not for applause, but with the quiet certainty that she was doing exactly what she was meant to do in that moment, and as the first part of her performance came to a natural pause, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The room had been transformed from a place of casual amusement to one of attention and presence. She had crossed a boundary she had never imagined crossing. What had begun as a request to entertain for laughs had already become something entirely different. Something powerful and real. And she knew, in that quiet, electric moment, that this was only the beginning. The room had grown quiet after her first notes. The playful laughter that had filled the space earlier had vanished, replaced by an unexpected stillness. Some of the guests shifted in their chairs, leaning forward, unsure of what to make of the music that flowed from her hands. Her fingers hovered over the keys, waiting, listening, and feeling the room's response. Each note seemed to stretch through the air, holding the attention of everyone present. She was aware of the eyes on her, but instead of fear, she felt a quiet determination. She had promised herself that she would not let this moment become a joke. The memory of years spent practicing alone came back to her. She thought of small apartments with thin walls where neighbors slept while she played softly, careful not to disturb anyone. She thought of evenings when her fingers ached, her back ached, and her mind felt heavy, but she kept playing anyway. Music had always been her companion, the one constant that gave her purpose. Tonight the piano in the cafe felt alive beneath her hands, and she realized how much she had missed sharing music with others, even if she had never intended to. The laughter that had once been expected now seemed impossible. People who had joked moments ago now watched her silently, some leaning toward each other, whispering softly. Their faces reflected curiosity, surprise, and slowly a sense of admiration. She could feel the shift, but she did not look up. Her focus remained on the keys, on the melody that was slowly building beneath her hands. Each note was deliberate, each chord a story. She wanted to prove to herself that her music could speak louder than doubt and ridicule as she played. She felt the tension in her body slowly easing. The initial nervousness melted into something different, confidence. She realized that she had spent so long hiding her talent, afraid of judgment and ridicule, that this moment was almost foreign. But as the music flowed, she found comfort in the sound. In the control of the notes and the way her fingers moved naturally across the keys, it was as if the piano had always been waiting for her, as if it knew she would one day claim the attention she had avoided for so long. The group in the cafe began to react in small ways. A hand tapped gently on the table in time with the melody. Someone's eyes widened, a smile breaking across a face that had been skeptical moments before. The whispers spread quietly, as if people were reluctant to speak too loudly and disturb the delicate balance of the music. Even the birthday celebrant seemed transfixed, eyes fixed on the pianist with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. No one moved to mock her. The energy of the room had shifted entirely. It was both exhilarating and strange. She let the melody grow, adding soft flourishes that had become second nature over years of practice. The music carried a story she had never voiced, feelings she had never shared. There was sadness, yes, but also hope and quiet strength. She imagined herself speaking through the keys, telling everyone in the room that she had been underestimated, that she had been invisible, but she was not powerless. The piano spoke for her, and the notes were her voice. For a moment, she remembered a friend from long ago who had told her, "People will always doubt what they cannot see. Don't let their doubt become your own." She had carried those words silently, tucked away, and now they felt alive in her mind. The room's attention was hers, but it was not about proving them wrong. It was about claiming her own space, showing that her talent existed, that it had always existed, and that she had nothing to hide. She noticed small details in the audience, a person shifting in their chair, a quiet gasp from someone at the back, eyes following her every movement. The laughter and joking had completely disappeared, replaced by an attentive, almost reverent energy. She was surprised at the effect she had on them. It was strange to be seen, truly seen, for something that had always been private. She felt a connection forming, one that did not rely on words, but on the shared experience of the music. As the melody continued, she began to experiment slightly, letting her fingers wander to keys she had avoided in practice because of their difficulty. She wanted to stretch herself, to push the boundaries of what she could do. Each note carried tension, uncertainty, and then resolution. She felt alive in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Her heart beat faster, but not with fear. It was a pulse of exhilaration, the kind that comes when you risk something deeply personal and are rewarded with recognition. Even if silent, the audience, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly still. Conversations had stopped entirely. People leaned forward, some holding their breath, others closing their eyes as if to better feel the music. The birthday decorations seemed to fade into the background. Balloons hung unnoticed, and the cake on the table remained untouched. All that mattered was the music, the story it told, and the hands that produced it. It was a moment that no one in the room had anticipated, a transformation from playful mockery to genuine admiration. Her fingers moved faster now, dancing lightly across the keys, creating patterns of sound that intertwined with the softer notes she had begun with. The melody rose and fell, swelling with emotion. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not out of sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being fully alive, fully present, and fully understood. She had never shared music like this with anyone, never in public, and the realization that she could do so successfully was intoxicating. Some people shifted in their seats, leaning closer to hear the subtleties of her playing. Others sat back, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. She caught glimpses of expression she could not have imagined: awe, respect, wonder. There were no mocking smiles, no whispered jokes, no smirks. The room had transformed completely, from a place of casual amusement to a space of unexpected reverence. The energy was tangible, quiet hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls and floors. She allowed herself a small smile, almost imperceptible as she noticed the change in the room. It was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about discovering that her talent, nurtured in private and hidden for so long, could command attention and admiration. She felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with applause or recognition. It was an internal victory, confirmation that her years of dedication and quiet perseverance had value. The music shifted again, softer now, more introspective. She let her hands linger on certain notes, allowing them to resonate and fade naturally. The tempo slowed, and the melody became reflective, almost meditative. She imagined the stories of everyone in the room, their lives, their struggles, their joys and sorrows, and she let the music touch each one of them. It was a subtle magic. It's an unspoken connection between her and the listeners that transcended words. Someone in the back let out a quiet sigh, not of boredom, but of wonder. A child leaned against their parent, eyes wide, captivated by the gentle rise and fall of the melody. Even the birthday celebrant, who had been laughing and joking only minutes before, now sat still, mouth slightly open, unable to tear their eyes away. The room had become a shared space of emotion, created entirely by her hands and the piano. She felt a sense of liberation as she continued to play. The fear that had gripped her moments ago, the doubt and hesitation, had melted away completely. She was no longer the invisible woman moving quietly among the tables. She was a musician, a storyteller, a force that could command attention with nothing but music. And the room was listening, fully, openly, without judgment or ridicule. The melody continued to unfold, each note carrying meaning, each chord a reflection of her inner world. She felt the connection between the keys and her emotions, the way the sound resonated through the room and into the hearts of the listeners. It was a dialogue without words, a conversation between her and everyone present. And in that conversation, she found understanding, empathy, a rare sense of fulfillment. Time seemed to slow as she played, the outside world fading completely. There were no distractions, no interruptions, just the music and the shared silence of the audience. She allowed herself to fully inhabit the moment, to pour everything she had into the notes, to let the piano speak for her in ways she had never imagined. It was exhilarating and exhausting, a full immersion into a world where only truth and expression mattered. Finally, as the last notes of her current piece lingered in the air, she lifted her hands slowly from the keys. The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. No one moved or spoke for several moments, caught in the afterglow of the music. She felt her heart pounding, not from fear, but from the intensity of the experience. She had faced the possibility of ridicule, embraced the unknown, and emerged not only unscathed, but triumphant. Her eyes met a few in the audience, and she saw genuine respect and awe reflected back at her. It was a subtle shift, a quiet acknowledgement of her skill, her courage, and the depth of her artistry. The room, once filled with laughter at her supposed expense, had become a space of recognition and appreciation. She felt a surge of confidence and a deep sense of satisfaction that she had never known before. As she prepared for the next part of her performance, she realized that this was more than a moment. It was the beginning of something transformative. The music had not only captured the attention of those around her, but it also transformed the way she saw herself. The quiet, invisible woman who had spent years in the shadows now stood fully present, fully seen, and fully alive. And for the first time, she knew that her talent, her dedication, and her passion could no longer be hidden. The journey was just beginning. She was ready to embrace it fully. The room remained silent after her last notes, but the quiet was different now. It was no longer expectant or nervous. It was attentive and almost reverent. People were holding their breath, not wanting to break the delicate spell her music had cast. She sat at the piano, hands resting lightly on the keys, feeling the weight of the moment. Her fingers tingled, ready to continue. Ready to explore melodies she had imagined countless times, but never shared with anyone before. She started again, this time allowing the music to flow freely, without hesitation. Her first notes were soft and deliberate, carrying emotion through every chord. She let herself remember the nights spent in her small apartment, practicing in solitude, learning each key, every scale, and every subtle nuance. Those quiet hours had shaped her, taught her patience and discipline, and now they were coming to life in front of people who had not expected her to succeed. The audience leaned in. The playful laughter from moments ago had vanished entirely. Some people whispered to one another, trying to understand what they were hearing. Their expressions were filled with surprise, disbelief, and slowly admiration. She had become something more than a server, more than someone ordinary moving quietly among tables. She had become a musician, a storyteller, creator of emotions through sound. She let her hands wander across the keys, creating a melody that built slowly, rising and falling like gentle waves. Each note was intentional, each chord placed with care. She imagined the faces of those watching her, their eyes fixed on her hands, following every movement. She could feel their curiosity, their awe, and it gave her courage. She realized she could hold their attention without words, without even looking at them directly. The piano had become her voice, and the room was listening. Her mind drifted briefly to the people who had mocked her or ignored her in the past. She did not play for revenge, but she acknowledged them silently. The years of feeling invisible, undervalued, and overlooked had built her skill and resilience. Every note she played was a testament to her dedication and perseverance. She allowed herself a quiet smile as she imagined those who had underestimated her now being confronted with her talent. Not in a showy way, but with honesty and grace. The music swelled, carrying her emotions forward. There was a subtle sadness in the melody, a reflection of loneliness and quiet struggle, but it was balanced with hope, courage, and strength. She had learned that life often asked you to hide, to minimize yourself, but tonight she was refusing. Tonight, she claimed her space and allowed herself to be fully visible, if only through the music. The room responded. She could feel the collective energy of the audience, their attention unwavering, as if they were holding on to every note, every pause, every rise and fall of the melody. A few people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others leaned forward, captivated by the subtle intricacies of her playing. The birthday celebration had faded into the background. Balloons, cake, and laughter were forgotten. All that existed was her and the piano, the room filled with emotion and understanding that transcended words. It was a transformation, not just of the space, but of everyone within it, including herself. She began to experiment, subtly adding flourishes and variations that she had practiced in private. The notes danced and intertwined, creating layers of sound that seemed to tell a story. She imagined each person in the room experiencing the music in their own way, connecting with memories, feelings, and thoughts they could not articulate. It was a silent conversation, a shared understanding that was both intimate and universal. She realized that this was the power of music, to connect people beyond barriers, beyond expectations, beyond judgment. Her fingers moved faster now, gliding over the keys with confidence and precision. The music became more complex, more expressive, reflecting the depth of her emotions. She felt exhilarated, not from attention or praise, but from the act of creation itself. The piano responded to her, each note resonating with clarity, each chord amplifying her presence. She was alive in a way she had not felt before, fully engaged in the present moment. Fully aware of her power to move others without a single word, some in the audience began to whisper softly, unsure if they were allowed to break the silence. Their faces showed disbelief mixed with admiration. The jokes and teasing that had preceded her performance seemed distant, irrelevant, almost impossible to recall. She was no longer the subject of mockery. She was an artist commanding attention with skill, grace, and subtlety. The shift in perception was profound, and it energized her. She played with renewed focus, feeling every note, every pause, every dynamic change. Her music became a journey, carrying listeners through valleys of gentle melancholy and peaks of quiet joy. Each chord had a purpose, each melody a meaning. She imagined stories in the faces of the audience, unspoken challenges, hidden joys, suppressed griefs. She let the music speak to them, letting the emotions she poured into each note find a reflection in their hearts. The room had transformed from a space of casual amusement to a sanctuary of sound, a place where connection and feeling mattered more than words or appearances. She paused briefly, allowing the last notes to linger in the air. The silence that followed was profound. She felt the energy of the room, heavy and present, and realized that the impact of her music was deeper than she had imagined. People were not just listening. They were experiencing, they were acknowledging her presence, her talent, and her dedication. And in that acknowledgement, she found a quiet validation, a confirmation that her years of practice, sacrifice, and dedication had meaning, she continued, her fingers now exploring softer, more subtle passages. The melody became more intimate, almost whispered, drawing listeners closer, compelling them to focus on the nuances. Her hands moved with fluidity, guided by instinct and feeling rather than strict technique. She allowed herself to be vulnerable through the music, letting the emotions she had kept hidden for so long emerge naturally. It was a delicate balance, powerful yet gentle, commanding yet tender. A few people shifted in their seats, visibly moved by the performance. A soft tear glistened in the corner of one listener's eye, unnoticed by others. She felt their responses, even without seeing them, and it strengthened her resolve. She was not playing to impress or to perform. She was playing to express, to connect, to share a part of herself that had long been concealed. The room, in turn, gave her attention, respect, and a kind of silent gratitude that was more meaningful than applause. As the music grew, she allowed herself to take risks, introducing subtle variations and unexpected chord progressions. She felt the thrill of creation in real time, the joy of improvisation within a structure she had mastered. Each note carried her confidence, her emotions, her story. The audience was caught in the ebb and flow of her music, experiencing tension and release, anticipation and resolution. It was a living, breathing entity that included everyone present. A shared moment of beauty and emotion, her hands moved tirelessly across the keys. Yet there was no sign of strain, only fluidity and intent. She was fully present, completely engaged, and utterly alive. The music was her language, and it spoke with clarity, honesty, and passion. She felt the bond between herself and the listeners deepen with every note. She was no longer just playing. She was communicating, sharing a part of her soul, inviting them to witness and understand it. The complexity of the music increased, yet it never became chaotic or overwhelming. Each note, each chord, each pause was deliberate and meaningful. She allowed herself to explore emotional peaks, moments of quiet reflection, and gentle crescendos that stirred the heart. She felt a profound satisfaction in this act of creation, in the power of music to reach beyond words and touch people in ways nothing else could. As she neared the end of her third piece, the room remained silent, but deeply engaged. People held their breath, reluctant to disturb the delicate moment. The energy in the air was tangible, a shared understanding that transcended language. Her music had created a space of empathy, reflection, and connection, and she felt a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment that she had never known. She had faced fear, doubt, and the possibility of ridicule, and had emerged stronger, confident, and alive. Finally, as the last note faded, she lifted her hands from the keys, feeling the resonance linger in the room. The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. She felt her heart racing, not from anxiety, but from the intensity and emotional depth of the performance. She had transformed from an unseen server into a musician capable of commanding attention and emotion, and she felt an exhilarating sense of triumph. The room, once ready to mock, had been transformed, and she had proven to herself that her talent was undeniable, unshakable, and alive. The room remained completely silent after her last piece, but the silence was no longer empty. It was full, heavy with attention, admiration, and emotion. Every person present seemed to be holding their breath, caught in a state between disbelief and awe. She rested her hands lightly on the piano, feeling the warmth of the wood, and allowed herself a brief moment to absorb what had just happened. Her fingers tingled from the intensity of her playing, and her heart still raced with exhilaration. She had never imagined that performing in front of others could feel so alive, so real. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to glance at the audience. For the first time, she truly saw them. Not as individuals who might judge her or laugh at her mistakes, but as people who were experiencing her music, connecting with it in their own ways. Their eyes were wide, some soft with wonder, some bright with a newfound respect. She felt a quiet thrill at realizing that she had transformed their perception, not through words but through music. Her next piece began quietly, almost whispering. She let her fingers trace the keys gently, crafting a melody that seemed to float through the air. It was tender, delicate, and full of feeling. She thought of the quiet nights when she practiced alone, the moments of doubt and frustration, and the small victories that came with learning each note and each chord. Now, those private experiences were being shared, unspoken, through every movement of her hands. The music had become a bridge between her world and theirs. The audience leaned in closer, as if trying to catch every nuance. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others followed her hands with fascination. She noticed a subtle change in their posture, shoulders relaxed, lips parted slightly, eyes softening. The laughter that had been expected when she first approached the piano had completely vanished. The space had shifted from casual amusement to a moment of shared intimacy, all brought about by the simple act of playing. She allowed the melody to grow, adding gentle variations and flourishes that she had practiced countless times in private. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes slow and deliberate, sometimes quick and playful, but always with purpose. She felt the rhythm of the room, the subtle reactions of the audience, and allowed those feelings to guide her playing. Music had always been her voice, but tonight it was more than that. It was a dialogue, a conversation that transcended words, connecting hearts and minds without effort or explanation. As she played, she became aware of the history she carried with her. The years of being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed had shaped her in ways she often resented, yet now she could see their value. Those experiences had given her patience, focus, and an understanding of subtlety. Every note she struck carried the weight of those years, the effort, the quiet dedication that had gone unnoticed until this moment. The realization gave her strength, and the music reflected that strength. Deep and resonant, the melody evolved, becoming more complex and layered. She let herself explore emotions that had been buried, letting the music express what words never could. There was joy, sorrow, longing, and hope, all intertwined in the ebb and flow of the performance. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the intensity of feeling and creation. She was fully present, and the room seemed to bend to the music. Held in rapture by the sound she produced, people in the audience were visibly moved. Some had tears in their eyes, while others simply stared, captivated by the delicate control and emotional depth of her playing. The birthday celebration decorations, the balloons and the cake had faded into insignificance. The cafe itself seemed to have disappeared, leaving only the piano, the music, and the shared experience. She realized how powerful a single act of authenticity could be, how deeply it could touch others when delivered with honesty and skill. She began to take more risks, allowing her hands to wander into unexpected harmonies and shifts in rhythm. Each note was deliberate, but the flow was organic, guided by instinct and emotion. She felt alive, fully immersed in the moment, and the audience responded subtly, adjusting their attention to match the dynamics and intensity of her playing. She could sense their awe, their connection, and it fueled her, pushing her to explore further, to express more. Her music became a story without words. It carried tension and release, sorrow and elation, and an undercurrent of courage and resilience. She imagined the people in the room listening, each interpreting the music in their own way, finding personal meaning and emotion in the notes. The connection was silent but profound, a shared understanding that existed in the space between the keys and the listeners' hearts. She had become a storyteller without speaking, a guide through emotion using only sound. Time seemed to stretch as she continued. She felt no fatigue, only a heightened awareness of each movement, each note, each subtle expression. The music filled the corners of the room, wrapping around the audience, and creating a sense of intimacy that was almost tangible. She realized how powerful her years of practice and solitude had been, preparing her for this exact moment, allowing her to command attention and convey emotion with authenticity and skill. As she played, small reactions emerged from the audience. A subtle sigh, a quiet murmur, a soft gasp, tiny acknowledgments of the effect her music had on them. She did not play for recognition, but it was impossible not to notice the shift in energy. People who had come expecting a joke or light entertainment were now fully engaged, fully present, and fully affected by the music. The transformation was striking, and she felt a quiet pride. Tempered with humility, her melody rose and fell, moving through peaks of emotion and valleys of reflection. She allowed herself to be vulnerable through the music, expressing feelings she had rarely acknowledged. The piano became an extension of her being, translating thoughts and emotions into sound that could be shared with others. She felt a deep sense of liberation, a release of tension and inhibition that had built up over years of caution and invisibility. The room responded in kind. There were subtle shifts in posture, the quiet relaxation of tension, and the soft absorption of emotion. The connection between musician and listener was palpable, a bond created not by words but by shared experience and understanding. She had never realized how powerful her private music could be in the presence of others. She had always feared judgment. But now she saw that authenticity and skill could command attention and respect without effort or assertion. She allowed the final section of her piece to unfold naturally. Without forcing it or planning it in detail, her hands moved fluidly, guided by intuition and feeling. The notes seemed to flow effortlessly, creating a tapestry of sound that enveloped the room. She felt a sense of completion approaching, a quiet resolution that mirrored the emotional journey she had taken through the performance. The audience remained still, captivated, and respectful, as if unwilling to break the fragile spell of connection as the last note lingered. Fading into silence, she held her hands above the keys, savoring the moment. The room remained quiet, but the silence was charged with emotion and understanding. People were absorbing what they had heard, reflecting on the journey they had shared with her through music. She felt a profound satisfaction, not in recognition or praise, but in the knowledge that her talent and dedication had touched others in a meaningful way. She slowly lifted her hands and allowed them to rest in her lap, feeling the resonance of the piano beneath her fingertips. Her heart raced with a mixture of relief exhilaration, and gratitude. She had faced fear, doubt, and the possibility of ridicule, and had emerged stronger, confident, and fully alive. The experience had transformed not only the room, but also herself. She had claimed her voice, her presence, and her space through the power of music. The audience remained in their seats, processing the performance in silence. Some were visibly moved, their eyes glistening with emotion. Others sat quietly, reflecting on the unexpected depth and beauty of what they had just witnessed. The energy in the room had shifted completely, from casual amusement to genuine admiration and respect. She realized that the moment had become more than a performance. It had become a shared experience, connection between people brought together by the universal language of music. She allowed herself a small, private smile. This was more than she had hoped for, more than she had imagined when she first approached the piano. The journey from being asked to play for laughs to holding the room in silent attention had been transformative. She had discovered her own power, her ability to touch and move others, and the profound impact of sharing her gift authentically. As she prepared to conclude the fourth piece, she felt a quiet sense of anticipation. The room was ready, the audience receptive, and she was fully present. The music would continue to speak, carrying the emotions, stories, and connections she had cultivated throughout the performance. The journey was far from over, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose, confidence, and excitement for what was to come. The room was hushed, and the weight of attention pressed gently but firmly against her senses. She could feel it in the quiet breath of the listeners, in the tilt of their heads, in the stillness of every hand and every eye. She had come a long way from the timid steps that had carried her to this piano. The first note she had played timidly had now grown into a performance that held the room in awe, and yet there was more to come. A final movement that would leave a lasting impression on everyone present. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment, almost reluctant to begin, savoring the stillness. Then, slowly, she allowed her fingers to fall on the keys, letting the first gentle notes ripple through the air. This time the sound was confident, deliberate, and full of life. Each chord seemed to tell a story, a narrative of quiet perseverance, resilience, and unspoken dreams. She could feel the energy of the audience feeding back into her, lending her courage, focus, and strength. She thought back to her years of private practice, to the nights of solitude when the world was silent and she was free to explore her music. Every moment of doubt, every time she had questioned herself, had led to this. She felt the culmination of all her experiences in her fingertips, and she let herself play freely, fully immersed in the performance. The room seemed to respond, the silence of the audience almost tangible, as if they were leaning into each note, holding on to every sound that emerged from the piano. The melody built slowly, rising and falling with delicate intensity. Her hands moved fluidly across the keys, weaving a story of hope and quiet triumph. The music was no longer just a reflection of her talent. It had become an expression of her very being, a testament to the strength she had found within herself. The audience could sense it, felt it even, and their attention remained unwavering. There was no room for doubt, no place for mockery. Only the honesty of her music filling every corner. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling a mix of exhilaration and calm. The power of the piano, the connection to the audience, and the clarity of her own emotions created a unique harmony. She felt seen, understood, and validated not through words, but through the deep, quiet acknowledgement of her skill and presence. The energy in the room was electric, yet gentle, full of reverence and admiration that grew with each passing note. Her music began to explore the highs and lows of emotion, moving from tender, soft passages to vibrant, dramatic crescendos. She had learned over the years how to convey feeling through subtle changes in tempo, touch, and expression, and she now applied every lesson she had ever learned. The audience felt it, and their reactions, though quiet, spoke volumes. The once playful observers had transformed into engaged listeners, each immersed in the emotional journey she was guiding them through. Her hands moved faster now, yet every note remained precise, intentional, and expressive. She could feel the power of the room, the shared heartbeat of the audience, in rhythm with her own. The music carried her story, but it also began to carry theirs, intertwining in a tapestry of human experience. They were no longer passive listeners. They were participants, witnesses, and companions on this journey she had initiated with courage and vulnerability. The melody softened slightly, dipping into reflective passages that hinted at the struggles and challenges she had faced. There was a delicate sadness in these notes, but it was balanced by an undercurrent of resilience and determination. She remembered moments of feeling invisible, of being underestimated, and of hiding her talent from the world. Yet here she was, fully present, fully engaged, and fully recognized by everyone in the room. The piano had become a bridge, connecting her private experiences with the hearts and minds of those around her. Her confidence continued to grow. As she navigated the final sections of the piece, she experimented with subtle variations, adding unexpected flourishes that kept the music alive and dynamic. The audience followed her effortlessly, absorbed in the intricate interplay of sound and emotion. She felt a sense of freedom she had rarely experienced before, the liberation that comes from being entirely true to oneself. Each note was a declaration of her skill, her dedication, and her courage. The music reached a climax, a powerful convergence of emotion and technical mastery. Her hands flew over the keys, producing a cascade of sound that was both exhilarating and profound. The audience was silent, but the intensity of their attention was palpable. She could feel the collective energy of the room, the quiet admiration, the awe that had replaced any expectation of mockery. She had commanded their respect, not through force or words, but through the honesty of her music. As the final notes approached, she allowed the melody to slow, to soften, to linger. Each note resonated with meaning, leaving room for reflection and emotion to settle in the hearts of the listeners. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had shared something authentic, something that had touched the audience in ways she could not fully measure. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with acknowledgement, appreciation, and the quiet awe of people who had witnessed something extraordinary.